And with that, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, and welcome to the main object Big Book study of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a blessing to be here with all of you. I am an alcoholic, and my name is David. So hello, hello, hello. It is we have global representation this morning, and I'm thrilled for that. And so, what I am going to do is I am going to uh, play a little brief Zoom roulette, and I'm going to ask my longtime compatriot Robbie W. Robbie W., would you be so kind as to read the preamble if I put it up on the screen for you, my friend?
Sure, it'd be an honor, David.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And there you have it.
Good morning, group. My name's Robbie, and I am an alcoholic. And this is our AA preamble. So, Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, their strength, and their hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is the desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, and does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose here this morning is to stay sober and to help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And David, back to you in the studios.
Robbie, thank you so much. And we'll come back to the categories in a moment, but I'd like to ask everybody to join with me in inviting God's presence into this meeting today by reciting the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We are a line by line big book study, so which was something that I only experienced for the first time about 3 years ago through Zoom. And my experience up to that point was that big book meetings were a chapter at a time, which always sort of felt like trying to drink from a fire hose. And so we slow the process down, we go line by line, and what we're finding is that a lot of things in the text open up to us when we take our time. And so, what we do as well is because I do know we have at least one, if not more, new people on the meeting this morning. So what we do is we go line by line, and we to help us understand the text ourselves, and to help us turn our big book into, um, I would say, really effective, simple tools that we can use to share the message with others. We break the text down into 5 categories, and you can see them there: questions, directions and explanations, promises, and warnings. The colors correspond to highlighter colors that I have, that I use in my study of the book. You can pick your own colors, of course. And then history, I just leave blank. As we go through the text today, we'll talk about those categories. And today, um, well, let me mention this as well. Our format is today I will share on the text for about 25 minutes till about the top of the hour at 7 o'clock. Then we'll open it up for discussion, questions, comments, your take on what we read, your experience, strength, and hope with what we've read, and then we'll go from there. Um, the meeting, just FYI, the meeting is being recorded, audio only, and just so because some people are not comfortable being recorded, which I totally respect. The recording will stop when my part is done, and then we post it on our YouTube channel. So if you miss a week, you can always go back and listen. So, as I alluded to earlier, we're on a new paragraph today. We are on page 30, more about alcoholism. And we're at the top. This is section 1. I want to sort of give an overview of where we are now because we started way back, believe it or not, gang, we started about 6 months ago. So we've been cranking it out here. And we've gone through the forwards and the preface and all of that, and of course Bill's story and there is a solution. So to kind of recap succinctly where we are right now so far in our reading of the book, we've seen with Bill's story that's given us hope, awareness, and hopefully identification with this disease. Then in the following chapter, there is a solution. Bill made it clear that the only way to be free of this malady is through what Dr. Jung called a vital spiritual experience. Now, God willing, if we are on board with what we've read to this point, we may be asking ourselves if we're a newly recovering or recovered alcoholic. We might say, okay, I agree, I'm one of you, I agree, okay, I'm ready to have that vital spiritual experience. What do I got to do? Just tell me. I mean, because it's all been a little theoretical up until this point. And with this chapter, more about alcoholism, Bill gets into the actual doing of the process of staying sober. And he does that through giving us the first of the 12 steps that we must take in order to be free. So, in other words, with this chapter, we are going to be getting stories and insight and direction on step 1 of our program. That's pretty much what they focus on here. So jumping in then, I'm just going to start reading at the top of page 30. Just FYI, that first paragraph, all of it, I highlighted as a warning in pink. So most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. And I promise to go a little quicker than this. I'm not going to stop at every sentence, but I think that this is important. There are several things that I think we need to acknowledge in this first sentence. And the one is the first part of that sentence. We've been unwilling to admit. And why is that? And there are a number of reasons for that. Part of our nature as alcoholics is many of us are defiant, and there is also the delusion. I would say the three. For some reason, some alliteration is coming to me. There are 3 reasons. All begin with D. Defiance, delusion, and dependence. And what I mean by that is our nature is defiant. Dependence is we actually we're not willing to admit we're an alcoholic, because if we do, we have to do something about it. And I remember thinking when I was drinking, it wasn't that I just loved drinking so much. Drinking was a chore. It was a job at that point. I was drinking to live, and for the sole reason that I felt that I needed it in order to navigate life and get through the world. So it was like oxygen for me. So I had that dependence, and all of that was fueled, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, about the delusion, twisted thinking. So now that's the first part of the sentence. The second part is most of us have been willing to admit we were real alcoholics. And I want to hit the pause button on that phrase, real alcoholics, because it's a phrase that we still hear a lot today. And I think it's important to recognize that very often what we hear today in meetings, when people talk about, well, they identify themselves as a real alcoholic, it tends to not be in the same meaning or the spirit that Bill was writing it back in the day. And what do I mean there? When Bill was writing this, culturally at that time, there was a tremendous amount of superstition, misconception, and myths and stigma around the disease of alcoholism. And what Bill really does, and we saw a little bit of this in the last chapter, is he focuses on this notion of a real alcoholic, meaning he gives almost a clinical definition of that term, and we'll see this momentarily. And so what he's doing is he's making objective this notion of this thing or this condition that's been this sort of evil specter in our lives and in the lives of our society. So when he says real alcoholic, he's meaning in the objective sense that we're defining it, most of us have been willing to admit we're an alcoholic. Now, I also feel the need to touch on very frequently when we hear somebody refer to themselves as a real alcoholic these days, it tends to carry with it almost, I would say, and again, I'm not talking negatively about any particular member. I'm just pointing out the intention of the book versus how it's sort of morphed over the years. So when you hear real alcoholic today, it tends to be on almost what I'm calling reverse elitism. Elitism, when you think of like elite people, the rich, the famous, the powerful, the movers and shakers, and it's almost like in AA you'll encounter almost this pride of, here's how bad I was. I'm a real, and when you ask them, well, can you define what a real alcoholic is? Well, I drank rock gut and I drank sterno and that's a real alcoholic. And I promise not to spend the whole 25 minutes talking about real alcoholics, but back to the text, when he says real alcoholics, he's already defined this term back on page 21. He's talked about it. He says at the top, and if we go to the first full paragraph, if you flip back momentarily, first full paragraph on 21, he says, what about the real alcoholic? And he talks about, at that stage, he talks about he may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. Boom. That's the definition of a real alcoholic. Now, I will say, if we jump ahead just briefly, if we turn to page 44, there's actually a test to determine, are you a real alcoholic? And it's a 2-question test. And if we look at the first paragraph, in the middle of the first paragraph on page 44, he says, if, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or when drinking, if you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Now, we'll come to that in a few weeks. But for now, I just want to put that in context. So, moving forward, no person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. And it wasn't, at least for me, if you were the type of alcoholic I was, it wasn't just, I'm not like a normal person. It was because my fellows, oh, you mean all the people I really despise and look down on? You mean I have a malady or a disease that those pathetic souls don't have, but I do? And so there was a little bit of ego crushing there. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. And some of those attempts may have been overt. In my case, what I realized was I developed, and it talks about it a little further on, we'll see. It talks about strategies we use or we try to use in order to counter the consequences of our drinking. Mine was having what I actually called the person a pace setter, which meant that if I was out drinking, I would scan the room or scan the group I was with and notice somebody who was drinking what I thought, quote unquote, normally. And they would be my pace setter. And what that meant was when they picked up their drink and took a drink, that's when I would pick up my drink and take a drink. And I would try to drink only as much as I saw them drink. And they would be my pace setter. And I would be sitting on my hands until the next moment when they picked up their drink. And I did that because, left to my own devices, I did not drink, I gulped. I opened it up and poured it down as quickly as possible. So those were my vain attempts to drink like other people. The idea that someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. And again, when I first read that, I did not relate to it because I never thought oh, I'm not sitting here thinking and strategizing. But when I realized all the subtle little ways and the excuses that I used for avoiding accountability for my drinking and doing something about my problem, I realized, yes, I had an obsession to not do that. Even when I was in AA, all the rationalizations I used for not having a sponsor, not working the steps, not doing service work. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. The next the next paragraph I have entirely in green as a direction. And it's an important direction. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. So there he's giving us a summary of what the first step is. He's going to go in depth with it. But for now, he's just sort of painting the picture with a broad brush at first. And then he's going to get more detailed. Conceding to myself that we were alcoholics. And we can use that definition of a real alcoholic that he established on page 21 to go by that. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently may be, has to be smashed. Okay. We need to point something out here, because here's a word that I glossed over for literally decades. This notion of delusion. And in the 12 and 12, you will, Bill talks about denial throughout the 12 and 12. And you'll hear people say, well, I had such denial. And however, the interesting part is when I looked at it, and when I actually looked at the index of in the study edition of Words in the Big Book. Guess what, gang? The word denial is not in our first 164 pages. Bill does not use that word to explain our disease. And he uses the word delusion. And what's the importance of that? The importance for me is critical. Because when you look at the definition of delusion and denial, first of all, denial is dismissing an idea that I know to be true. Like, for me, that's like looking out my window right now and saying, oh, the grass doesn't need to be cut. That's denial. Because if you look at my grass, you're saying, that grass needs to be cut. I'm in denial about my yard needs right now. I know it to be true. That's not a delusion. A delusion is embracing and advocating a belief that has constantly been proven false. And the key is the difference between the underlying belief. In denial, the underlying belief is a true belief. I'm just not willing to accept it. And the thing about a delusion, when you look at the clinical definition of a delusion, not only is it embracing a false belief, the more that belief is proven false, the stronger my conviction becomes. So I'm sure people would say, looking at me, they would say, think about what happened the last time David went out and drank. Why is he drinking again? Because from their perspective, it's quite evident that I cannot drink successfully. However, the more I drink and the more disaster I have, the more I realize I need alcohol to deal with the consequences of my drunkenness. Does that make sense? Okay. So the delusion that we are like other people, or presently maybe, has to be smashed. And I will say this one thing and then we'll move on. Also, the key, if I have denial, if my underlying problem is denial, reminders solve my problem. My problem is solved by reminders, or by what you might call keeping it green, or remembering, or conviction. But if I have delusion, the only thing that's going to save me is a spiritual experience. Because my mind can't free me from delusion. Only God can. Moving on. The first two, so that's all in green for direction. Moving on, the first two sentences are green for direction or explanation also. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. So he's circling back to a point that he's just, Bill will do this very often. Excuse me. He will offer a precise explanation, a definition. He'll enlighten us on some point, and then he'll come back and he'll circle to the main point. So he's circling to the main point. We are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic, and remember, we've defined, or Bill's defined for us, what a real alcoholic is. No real alcoholic ever recovers control. So what he's talking about is that our strategizing does not work. And I remember coming in, I don't know about anybody else, but I remember coming into Alcoholics Anonymous being of like two minds at once. On the one hand, I was crushed beyond recognition. And on the other hand, I was patting myself on the back that, yes, I know that this drinking has really devastated my life, but thank God I still have my superior problem solving skills. Can anybody relate to that? Or is it just okay? Good, good, good. I was thinking, like, man, I'm maybe I'm just too sick for this crew. Um, okay. We know that no real alcoholic ever regains control. The next sentence I have in pink for a warning. All of us felt at times we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. For this, as many of you know, I turned to my trusty 1939 dictionary, and because I wanted to be sure that I understood precisely what Bill meant when he said pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. So let's jump to the end first. Demoralization. When I look it up in the dictionary from 1939, it says moral corruption. And that I relate to. Interestingly, there is a what you might call a minor definition. That was the major definition, moral corruption. There was a minor definition that I really related to as well. Thrown into confusion. And remember, it talks about where I'm jumping ahead a little bit. We're like tornadoes ripping through the lives of the people around us. And it wasn't just like I overturned your furniture and stuff like that. How I was, the kind of tornado I just created this like upside down logic and this confusion in the people around me. So, backing up a second, pitiful and incomprehensible. Pitiful means moving to compassion. So you see something and your only response is to have compassion, which I thought was interesting. I thought it meant pathetic. But he's saying something different. But the thing that's really, I think, key for me is incomprehensible, which means not to be understood. So I remember coming to AA and hearing people tell their stories. And at least what I heard was when they told their story. Now, they may not have been saying this, but this is what I heard. What I heard was they told just this logical sequence of events that all sort of made sense. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous not just baffled, but completely unable to make sense in a logical way how I ended up where I was and what wreckage I created in my life and why. It was pitiful and it was incomprehensible. And you know what? I've been sober now 34 years. And to this day, there is even more about my drinking that is incomprehensible to me. It is beyond my ability to understand it. The rest of this paragraph I have in green. We are convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grip of a progressive illness. And progressive, again, back to the dictionary, means moving forward. And so what it means is while we may think we're getting better or treading water, we don't heal from this disease while we are still drinking. As a matter of fact, as we've learned, even when we're not drinking, we do not heal from this disease. We heal from the impact of the disease. But if we picked up another drink, we would find that the drinking progressed our alcoholism rather progressed the whole time we were abstaining from alcohol. But we are in the grip of a progressive illness over any considerable period. We get worse, never better. And notice he points out any considerable period, meaning that if I look day to day, well, like yesterday or today or last night, I didn't drink as much as I drank last week. Okay, Bill's saying don't compare today to last week. How about 5 years ago compared to today? Oh, well, that's another story. Yes, John, please.
Morning, people. My name's John. I'm an alcoholic, and I just want to recall to you people when I was afraid of running out of alcohol, that I wouldn't have access to it when I had the craving for it, when I needed it. But even more than afraid of running out, I was afraid that someone would try to take it away from me, separate it from me, isolate me from the ability to obtain that alcohol. And I even went so far as to perceive that if anybody tried, if I had a shotgun, I'd click that shotgun and point it at them. Stay away from me. Stay away from trying to separate me from my booze. It was that critical that I have access to it. I didn't want to run out, and I didn't want anybody to try to take it away from me. Thank you for letting me share.
Oh, John, thank you. The next paragraph I have entirely in, actually, most of the reading that we'll finish out, I have entirely in pink for a warning. And really, he's summarizing. This paragraph is more a summary. He's re-emphasizing certain key points. We are like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which makes alcoholics of our kind like other men. We have tried every imaginable remedy. In some instances, there has been brief recovery, followed always by a still worse relapse. Physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. And really, I think that that paragraph goes to dispel a lot of society's misconceptions about the disease at that point. And so you see what Bill's doing in these opening paragraphs is he's really trying to level the playing field and free us from whatever misconceptions we may have brought into the door with us and create objective definitions, like clear, concise definitions that we can all agree on that will allow us to move forward. And so I have that all in pink, and then just closing out the first two sentences in the next paragraph I have in pink as well. Despite all we can say, many who are, here we go again, real alcoholics are not going to believe they are in that class. I want to emphasize the first part of that sentence, despite all we can say. So one of the things that's very clear then is we should not be baffled when we try to share this message and it's either rejected or contradicted by the behavior of someone we're trying to help, because Bill is making it clear to us it doesn't matter what we say, it doesn't matter how much evidence we try to pile on to that problem drinker. Many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe they are in that class. He's establishing it right off the bat. By every form of self-deception and experimentation, they will try to prove themselves exception to the rule, therefore non-alcoholics. And I'm sure most of us here can think of at least one, probably in some cases many, people who are out drinking right now, right at this moment, who we've shared the message with, or they've heard the message, they've been in meetings with us. And then closing out this paragraph, the rest of it I have in green for explanation or direction. If anyone who is showing inability to control his drinking can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. As I've mentioned before, and I'll end with this. This is one of those sections, these two sentences, that we should read almost with two different ears. One is two different sets of ears. One is as a newly recovering or recovered alcoholic. And again, Bill is just dispelling myth. But the other is as somebody who's established in this program, who's helping other people. Because what kind of attitude is Bill asserting for carrying this message? If you can drink like a normal person, our hats, now this, since people don't wear hats generally these days, back when this was written, everybody wore a hat, and taking your hat off to somebody was a sign of respect and admiration. So if you can drink successfully, we show you respect and admiration. And with that, I'm going to pause right there. We'll pick up with the next paragraph that talks about experimentation. We'll do that next week. I more than went over my time, so thank you for indulging me. And I want to open it up. So do we have any comments or questions or thoughts or related?